To get started looking at data binding, we'll create a new WPF project and call it Data Binding One Way. This will illustrate one-way binding. After a little bit, we'll also illustrate two-way binding. In order to illustrate binding, we need a binding source. Typically, that's some form of POCO, plain old CLR object. In order to get such an object, we'll need to declare a class and an instance of that class. Let's go to the project and say add class, and we will add an employee class. As soon as that comes up, we will mark our employee class public, and we will give our employee class two public properties. The first will be the name of the employee, and the second will be the employee's title. In addition, we will give our class a static method called getEmployee, which will instantiate an employee and return it. This class will act as a stand-in for obtaining an employee from a database or from a web service. With our employee class in place, we are now ready to create a form that will display that employee. Let's turn to mainwindow.xaml. In mainwindow.xaml, we automatically have a grid. We're going to place a stack panel into that grid, and we will give our stack panel a name. Inside the stack panel, we're going to create two more stack panels, each with the orientation of horizontal, so that we can have a prompt and a value. The first inner stack panel, we will add orientation equal horizontal, and inside that we will add a text block, and we will set that text equal to name, and that will serve as a prompt. The second text block will have a margin of 5 on the left, and remember the margin is left, top, right, bottom if you're putting in 4 values. But for the text, we want to bind to the name property of our employee object. And so we use a special syntax, open curly brace, the keyword binding, and then the name of the property that we're binding to. That's it for our first inner stack panel. Our second inner stack panel is very, very similar, except that the prompt says title, and we bind to the title. Notice that we are binding to a property, name or title, but we have not designated what object that property belongs to. To do so, we need to set the data context. There are a number of ways of setting the data context. One very easy way is to turn to the code behind, and in the constructor, after we initialize the component, we can say data context equal to, and now we want to call that static getEmployee method of the employee class. And that will return an employee object, and that employee object will be the data context whose properties we are binding to. Let's run this application, and you can see immediately in our main window that we have successfully bound to the name and title of that employee object.